Hi, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to continue on our discussion with mental illnesses in fiction, and we're going to move away from addictions, which we've been doing for a while, and I figured I'd move into eating disorders, because I keep mentioning them in the context of addictions, so it seems kind of logical to do this. Eating disorders are a tricky bunch of mental illnesses. There's different ones. Most counselors don't like working with folks with eating disorders. There's a few things. Probably primary is fear more than anything else. Eating disorders have the highest mortality rate of any mental illness out there. And that's kind of surprising to a lot of people because we assume like, oh, heroin addiction or alcoholism, people drink themselves to death, or maybe someone's like schizophrenia, they get themselves killed, or at least depression, the suicide rates. No, actually, it's eating disorders. It's a particular form of eating disorder in which one simultaneously doesn't eat very much food, and they also tend to purge what little they do eat. They make themselves vomit up what they eat, and that is a lethal combination. It's very hard on the heart, and eventually a lot of these, I think something like 1 out of 5 die of a heart attack because the body just can't handle that kind of torture. So because of that, and counselors learn about that. A lot of counselors just want to avoid eating disorders from like a liability standpoint, which is really kind of one of the worst reasons to do it. A more reasonable reason to not want to work with folks with eating disorders, it's just a very different kind of mindset. The clients have a very different kind of mindset, and it's one that's not very well understood because, with eating disorders, basically what an eating disorder is someone that has an unhealthy relationship with food, and how that unhealthy relationship manifests is the different kinds of eating disorders. And particularly when we're talking about anorexia, this is someone who doesn't want to eat. In a world full of food, which is, if you live in a Western society, we are not starving. In fact, we have a lot of diseases of abundance in Western societies, particularly America. But these people are surrounded by food and they don't want to eat. And that, I think, confuses a lot of people because it kind of goes against basic biology. All animals need to eat. And the only time animals don't tend to eat is usually when they're kind of sick, Sometimes it's the sign that a dog isn't doing well as they don't want to eat their food or something else like that. And so I think a lot of this is confusing to a lot of folks because it seems simple, but it's not. And because also people with eating disorders tend to be very, very secretive. They don't want you to know that they have an eating disorder. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to get found out. They are very good at hiding what they're doing. Better at hiding what they're doing than a lot of addicts that I've worked with. And so someone can have a really bad eating disorder for years before someone notices, before it gets so bad that it becomes pretty obvious what's going on. They're very good at hiding what they're doing and lying, sometimes just by a lie by omission. They're the friend who's always already eaten. Y'all are getting together for lunch, and they'll show up and oh, I'm sorry, I just got starved. I had something to eat earlier. I'm just gonna have some water. That sort of thing. These sort of little lies. It's very easy to tell people. Even people with binge eating who tends to overeat, the other end of the spectrum. They're really good at hiding what they're doing. They will binge in the middle of the night, and they will hide all the wrappers or whatever else afterwards. And in that sense, they are a lot like an alcoholic who will, go through a case of beer and then take all the empty somewhere else. But reality, even addicts will be a lot more open about their addictions than folks with eating disorders. And so it's also just very tricky, and it's not something that we, as counselors, are really trained to ask people about. I always ask my clients about their drug use, their alcohol use. I ask about like sleep and exercise, that sort of thing. I never really think to ask someone how their relationship with food is, because it's just not something that's really kind of taught. I've had a few clients that look very underweight, and I can ask them about it, but reality is they can tell me anything, just like the addicts. They can tell me anything, and I'm not going to follow them home and see what they're doing. And so, also, I think with eating disorders. Um, when I first, I'm going to tell you a little story. Story time. When I first, when I first opened my private practice, I was doing okay. I was getting by. I had enough clients that I could kind of pay my bills, but it was just that. I was just kind of getting by, and I was kind of tired of getting by. And so I decided, well, I'll just get a part-time job at one of these clinics or something around town, and that'll just help bring in a little more like regular income, and that will be good. And I saw an ad for an eating disorder treatment facility, and I was like, well, I'll just, throw in my application, but I don't think they'll hire me anyway. And, well, another story, but yeah, I did get hired. The clinical director liked me and decided to give me a chance. And so I was about to go into this world working with clients with an issue that really I knew very little about. In grad school, we spent, I think, I don't even know it was like a whole class period, a whole 3-hour class period talking about eating disorders. That's really the beginning and end of my formal education in eating disorders, is maybe 3 hours in a single classroom, a single class I had to take. And so there was a lady here who, at the time she was here, she specialized in working with eating disorders, and I think she had an eating disorder when she was younger as well, which is typical for counselors who specialize in eating disorders. They've usually had one themselves. But anyway, I asked her, so what do I need to know about working with clients that have eating disorders that I probably don't know? Just kind of fishing for in what way am I ignorant and I don't even know that I'm ignorant. And she responded really almost immediately without thinking. She said, well, your eating disorder clients will be the angriest clients you'll ever work with, and they won't show it. And what I think is great is when I tell this story to clients with eating disorders, they usually smile because now I've actually said the thing that they know is true, but they can't really admit that there's a deep anger with clients with eating disorders. Where that anger comes from is always different, and that's a part of the counseling process. But there's almost always a deep-seated anger. And the way they for whatever reason, this is hard to imagine, hard to figure out, they're managing their anger through food. If they're a different kind of person, they'd manage their anger with alcohol or with pills or something else like that. Or they'd just be angry all the time or something else like that. But for whatever reason, food becomes their mechanism of coping. And then there's 3 big categories. There's the anorexia / orthorexia, there's bulimia, and then there's binge eating. And I kind of put them on a spectrum like that. I don't know if that's really true or accurate or not, but that's what I do. The anorexia, anorexia means no eating, no eating. And that's basically, and a lot of people are kind of familiar with anorexia. These are people who eat very little, or if anything at all. They tend to lose a lot of weight. They tend to always assume that they are more overweight than they really are. They have a very distorted view of their own body. Everybody else is looking at them and thinking they weigh 80 pounds and they look sick and they're about to die, and they'll tell you about how they're still a little overweight. And the body dysmorphia seems to be an aspect of all the eating disorders as well. It's almost everybody. Well, I shouldn't say all of them because I don't think binge eaters really do. Orthorexia is something that's kind of in the news. I don't think it's really officially diagnosed, but orthorexia means right eating. Right as in correct. There is a moral quality to food with anorexia, with orthorexia, even a little bit of bulimia, I guess even with binge eating. Food isn't just delicious or not so delicious or good for you or not so good for you. Food, for a lot of these folks, it is good food, as in proper food, holy food, moral food. This is bad food, evil food. Immoral food, if you think in those terms. And for anorexics, to them, being overweight makes you all the other bad stuff too. You're bad, you're evil, you're stupid, you're lazy, you're all the things that people hate. And so that's one of the reasons why it's very tricky to get anorexics to put on weight, is because we're asking them to I don't know, become a bad person and so we have to break down that barrier. And orthorexia is kind of the first step to actual anorexia, where there is a proper diet and you must adhere to that proper diet or bad stuff. And that proper diet can be veganism. Not to say all vegans have eating disorders, but a lot of people with eating disorders are vegans. I think the keto diet, the paleo diet, anything that's a diet that's based upon a lot of restricting. Not just sort of overall calorie restricting, but that sort of like cut out all the carbs or all the meat or all the fat or all the whatever. Don't eat anything that grows below ground or something. When you get into that realm, not to say that that's all coming from an eating disorder space, but that sort of feeds this morality sort of thing. It's not about like, I shouldn't, I'm not going to eat meat because I think meat is unhealthy and I don't like the food industry or the, factory farming. To them, it's like, no, bad people eat meat. Evil people eat meat. See what I'm getting at? Then the next sort of category is the bulimia. With bulimia, it's usually about purging. That's the big thing. They will eat. Sometimes not very much, or sometimes they'll do the binge and purge. They'll overeat and then they'll get rid of it somehow. But that's the purging aspect is a part of them. And for them, a lot of it is that purge. It's almost like they're trying to deal with difficult emotions by literally physically getting it out of their body, by making themselves vomit. Some will take a lot of laxatives, so they'll poop it out. And to some, it's exercise. And again, exercise is great. It's great for your mental health. You should do it. But when it reaches eating disorder level, it's the exercise is now tearing down the body. It's not healing the body. It's not keeping you strong and healthy. It is now sort of starting to destroy the body. I remember one time I went to the gym, and there was a girl there who I'm quite certain has an eating disorder because it's just I've been around it enough now that I can kind of spot it. And a lot of folks with eating disorders can do that too. Just like a lot of addicts can spot an addict pretty easily. But I went to the gym, and I think I worked out. I think I was there for like an hour and a half, and I was kind of doing weights. And to be honest, I wasn't really doing it very intense, so it wasn't really a hard workout. But I was there for like an hour and a half. And there was a girl who was just going full blast on the Stairmaster. She was doing it when I walked into the gym, and when I walked out of the gym, she was doing it at the exact same intensity. This was not a strong woman. She had, very, very thin, very underweight, and I think that's what she was doing. She was purging through exercise, and so that's the big aspect. And then there's binge eating. Binge eating, I think, is the one eating disorder that probably hits men the most, although men can be bulimic and I've worked with anorexic men as well. But in general, eating disorders is kind of a female disease. But I think binge eating is kind of a hidden disease for men because it's too easy for us culturally to say, oh, he's just a big guy. He's got a big appetite. He's got a man's appetite. That sort of thing. It's like, no, he's out of control. And that's the difference between a binge versus overeating is the lack of control. We've all done that. You go to the restaurant and the waitress comes by and goes, "Can I interest y'all in dessert? We have a blueberry cheesecake or something." Like, oh God, yeah, it sounds good. Let's do the blueberry. And then you kind of feel bad because you overate and that sort of thing. But there was a choice there. There was a decision. It was you're eating because you like the taste of the food, because it's a special occasion, you like who you're with, and you want to keep the night going. It's a great date, and you don't want it to end or something. Whereas a binge, there's a loss of control, and there's a lot of shame. And they tend to hide it. I remember working with one gal that she would go to the drive-thru at Taco Bell and order pretty much everything, And she said even when she got to the drive-thru, she would just sort of hand the card like this because she didn't even want to see the person. She didn't even want them to look at her, because she knew she was, and then she would go off, park someplace, and just eat everything, in the front seat of her car. And it was just sort of like this out of control kind of thing. And with binging, I think it kind of works with addictions. I'll have alcoholism, and some people even suggested alcoholism might even be like a form of eating disorder. I don't know if I buy that. But it's that same sort of, I want to drown my emotions in food. I want to smother these bad feelings, these bad thoughts, these bad whatever they are, these uncomfortable feelings. I want to smother them and drown them in food. And whether it's the drive-thru at Taco Bell or even grapes, this gal, even joked about like, yeah, I can binge on broccoli, grapes. I've done that. It's not about the food. It's not about the deliciousness of the food or how good it is. It is about the quantity and how much can you shove down into your body as fast as you possibly can, because that's what the binge eating is trying to do. And so getting back to the fiction part of all this is, how do you write a character with an eating disorder? Well, one, you have to remember there's a deep-seated anger there. And it has to kind of come out every now and then in some ways. If you read Saga of the Scout, I think I even gave this away, that Emily, the sister, has an eating disorder. Now, I never actually wrote that she has the eating disorder. I might put that into a later book or something. But when I wrote it, that was what I had in mind. She was a competitive gymnast, which unfortunately gymnasts and dancers and models have some of the highest rates of eating disorders, because it's very focused on what they look like or their body shape or min-maxing their ratio of muscle to fat or whatever. And so they have to be hyper conscious about food. And these are also, of course, industries that are typically done by girls. And eating disorders, for whatever reason, seem to affect girls more than men. And so Emily was like that. She had this deep-seated anger towards her mother, basically, and indirectly towards her brother, Ethan, the main character. And that anger manifests. And if you read the book, you'll see ways that it manifests and stuff. And so that's one aspect you have to do with the eating disorder. Just like with the addictions too, you also have to show them lying, and you have to show them hiding things, and you have to show them having a weird, unhealthy relationship with food in some sort of way. I would really suggest, if you want to have a character that has an eating disorders, kind of watch some of the videos and stuff of people talking about their eating disorders, particularly people who are in recovery, who can kind of, in a healthy, retrospective way, explain how they thought and how they behaved and what was going on in their lives to do that. I have noticed, and this is a trend, and it's not necessarily a solid trend, although I did put it in Saga of the Scout, is that a lot of the clients that I've worked with, a lot of the girls particularly, who had eating disorders, they had a family dynamic that was also very unhealthy, because this usually starts at an early age. Some girls will say that their eating disorder started when they're 8 or 9 years old. It's not uncommon. That's when they first started thinking about how they're overweight, how they need to watch what they're eating. They started becoming obsessed with dieting, and they're not even out of elementary school yet. But a lot of them have one parent who is over-involved, no boundaries, too involved in their life, almost like sometimes get into the realm of like what we call emotional incest, where especially if it's the cross-gender sort of thing, where the dad treats his daughter almost like a wife. There's no sex going on, at least you hope not, but in all other ways they kind of are creepy. And then the other parent is just distant and removed. Dad gets his emotional needs met through his daughter, which is not healthy, and then the wife is just sort of disconnected altogether. Or it can be flipped around, which I think this is more common, where overly involved mother, no boundaries, sometimes very passively critical all the time, just makes passing comments and judgments about the girl's weight or appearance or something. And then the other parent, the father, is just gone. He's either really still there, but not connected with the family at all. He's busy with work or whatever else. Or he's just physically gone. There's been a divorce and he's out of the house and that sort of thing. Don't know exactly why or how that seems to set up, but that is a trend that I've noticed with a lot of clients, particularly with anorexia and bulimia, that seems to be a family dynamic as well. So if you're going to write a character that has these sort of issues, that may be something to kind of think about as well when you're kind of conceptualizing your character. But anyway, yeah, let me know what you think. Is there any other questions you have about eating disorders? They're a very confusing and sometimes controversial topic, and they've kind of fallen out of the public eye, I think, to some degree. I don't know. I don't follow Instagram and a lot of that other stuff very well, so I don't know if people are really talking about it. But I do remember I think it was 1980 when Karen Carpenter died of anorexia. That was what sort of catapulted eating disorders into the mainstream, and it was a big topic back in the 80s, a little bit back in the 90s. I don't know if it's talked about that much. So let me know. Is it something that y'all want to know more about, or you have other questions? Different ways to think about this. But anyway, I will talk to you later. Bye.